Brave Fencer Musashi is an action-adventure RPG with platforming elements. Now, you've actually seen this a lot in some of the big games coming out in the last few years. We've seen it in games like Darksiders 2, the new Tomb Raider, Borderlands 1 and 2, but this game came out 15 years before this big gaming trend of the last few years where various genres are mixed in together to make the game as rich as possible. Brave Fencer Musashi is basically the story of this brave fencer who is summoned to this otherworldly dimension to save the people of the world. You have bigger quests and smaller quests. Like, it could be anything from saving a princess from the grip of the ultimate evil, or just getting someone's dog back. The problem with the questing in Brave Fencer Musashi isn't the fact that they're so varied and are so different in scale, but the fact that they can be really confusing. Like, a huge portion of this game is aimlessly running around because you don't know what you're doing. Several times during my playthrough, I just had to go to a walkthrough because I would have just been running around all the various areas in this game aimlessly for God knows how long. I'll give you an example. You glide down to this village and there's a guy standing in the way of a passageway, and I automatically assume, just from playing a ton of games in the past, that that's where you need to go. So you run around the village, you waste a little bit of time, and the guy leaves when it gets a little darker, and finally you can go through the passageway. So you go through the passageway, but then there's a dead end in the little area where you ran into. You're not sure what you're supposed to do. There's like a little dog bone laying on the tiny little island, but you can't really use it. You can't get any further because you can't make this really long jump over the water. So you assume the dog bone has something to do with what you're supposed to do next, but you can't pick it up, so it's pointless. What you're supposed to do is run into town and find where the mayor lives. How would you know where the mayor lives? You wouldn't. You would just have to knock on every door, go into every shop, and just find him that way. And you have to keep in mind, some places in town are open during one part of the day and closed during another part of the day, and the mayor's house isn't much different. You could have gone to the mayor's house and nobody would answer when you knocked on the door because you weren't there during that specific time of the day when the mayor is available. So you would just assume no one's there and you'd pass that house over the next time. But you actually find the mayor and you talk to him, and he tells you that there's this dog that the village has become fond of, and he will help you progress further in the story if you go save this dog. So wouldn't you know it, you just run all the way back to where that dog bone was, but this time around it's not just a dog bone, there's a dog on top of it, and you have to walk the dog back to the village. Basically, the dog wouldn't have appeared until you talk to the mayor. It doesn't make any sense. The game follows its own linear path in the various quests, and if you don't abide by that path, you are going to be lost. But it's not just about following a path. Sometimes the game quests are just confusing. Like something as simple as a guy asking you for some water and bread to progress in the story. So you have to go out to the town, you have to find out where they sell the water and bread. There's a grocery store that sells various types of breads, but no water. He only sells milk. So I assumed, okay, milk is fine. I mean, why can't the guy just drink some milk with the bread? So I just bring the milk and bread to him. No, I can't eat this bread without water because I haven't drunk anything in days, and I'm basically gonna choke on the bread because I need some water with the bread. But he could easily just have the milk with the bread, and that would act just like water. It would make the bread soggy. But no, it has to be H2O. It cannot be milk. And no stores sell water, so I assume the fountain in the middle of the town is where you're supposed to get water. So you stand near the fountain and you try to get some water from it, and no, you can't get water. So then I assume maybe I need to get a cup somewhere, so I run around looking for a cup. I couldn't find a cup. It turns out it's not the fountain that you're supposed to get the water from. There's this unassuming well, which you probably won't even see most of the time, depending on what kind of camera angle you're switched to in the game. It's just a little hole next to a fence. You honestly wouldn't even think it's a well. You don't even see any water in there. And on top of all that, you can't get the water from the well at any time of the day. Sometimes there's these two women standing there and they're preventing you from getting the water. The quests in this game can just be straight up confusing and needlessly complicated, and not for the right reasons, for very silly reasons, and that pisses me off. But the good parts of this game way outweigh the bad parts. When you actually complete the little tasks people give you and they set you off on a major quest, that's where the fun begins. You're running around these environments, slashing up bad guys with 2 types of swords that you have, jumping from platform to platform, jumping from pole to pole, solving puzzles along the way to progress further. It is just so incredibly rich for an action-adventure RPG game from 1997. I mean, Brave Fencer Musashi really is PlayStation's answer to Zelda games. The various commands you have at your disposal are basically things that help you traverse through the environment to your set goal. For example, obviously, you have the jump command to jump around because there's a lot of platforming in Brave Fencer Musashi. But also, one of your swords can suck in the powers of enemies you fight. It's almost like Mega Man in that regard, where you can basically suck out the powers of almost every enemy you see during the gameplay. And these powers are really different from each other. It's not always just a new way to shoot. Sometimes it's a power that shrinks enemies. Sometimes it's a power that makes you jump around so you can traverse a part of the environment which you couldn't jump over otherwise. Sometimes it's something as simple as a gun. Now this sword, while it can suck up the powers of your enemies, it also doesn't hit as hard as your other sword. Your other sword just hits with these super powerful haymakers, and when you power it up and do this spinning attack, it can almost kill every single add-on enemy in one foul swoop. But Brave Fencer Musashi is strong on his own, even without the sword. Like, he can basically run up to all the enemies, even the huge bosses, and when the opportunity arises, he can pick them up and just toss them. This is pretty cool when you're just tossing regular enemies, most of which are bigger than you anyway, but when you're beating up a gigantic mech robot boss, and then he's a little tired from the fight, and you get to pick him up, and I mean, this thing is like, I don't know, 30 times bigger than you, and just toss it through a wall, it's just fantastic. Or even better, toss it off a cliff.
Hey, you forgot something!
I had to let him go. The towns are there to basically save, to buy various provisions, so you do a little better during the really long quests that you have to do, like running through various forests or up mountains. And there's also voice acting. All the major NPCs have fully voiced dialogues, and the voice actors are fantastic. Not all of the people have voice acting, but there is a ton of voice acting in this game. Way more than you'd expect from a game already this rich and from 1998. As you just run around, Brave Fencer Musashi levels up various attributes just by simply using your swords, or just using your special abilities, or just using your brain. Sometimes you can also raise your attributes by screwing around with enemies. Like, I saw this one little enemy running around. I didn't want to hurt it because it didn't look dangerous, but I just ran up to it, sliced it a few times. It didn't seem to do much, so then I decided to try to catch it. I caught it, threw it, and it raised my hit points by like a ton. It was fantastic. I didn't know it would do that. It's just one of those great little finds that you just discover by just running around and finding new things in this massive world. And it's basically the game. Sometimes pretty confusing, especially when you're doing tasks for the town folks, but once you're actually out in the wild, fighting baddies, solving various puzzles, jumping from platform to platform, fighting epic boss battles, and stealing the powers of enemies, this game is just non-stop fun action. It's one of those games that I forgot I was doing a review for. I mean, I was playing it for like hours, and I'm like, oh wait, I should be memorizing stuff to actually review the game. I just got lost in the experience. It's that good of a game. Brave Fencer Musashi for the PlayStation 1 gets a very deserved Stan Birdman rating of a 9.2 out of 10. This is a great game, and you have to try it out. I mean, I can't imagine a gamer that wouldn't like this game. It is just one of those games that transcends genres, and it's just appealing to everyone. Thanks for watching. Goodbye, my friends.